News media bias? Maybe you should look in the mirror. I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle, and this is Bill Whittle Now. Bill, there's a study out from the Knight Foundation and the Gallup organization that is suggesting that claims that the news media are biased may also be influenced by the bias of the readers. And I'd like to quote a little bit from the story that I read on this in the New York Times, which is, by the way, a non-biased news outlet. And here's what they said. People identifying with the Republican Party who read media perceived as left-leaning, like the New York Times or Vox, without knowing where it came from, rated it as more trustworthy than a group that did know where it came from. Similarly, those identifying with the Democratic Party who read news media perceived as right-leaning, like Fox News, rated it higher when they didn't know it was coming from Fox News. I am wondering, Bill, how much a role this may play in the way we look at the news media. If you didn't know it was a New York Times story, could you suss that out just by reading it?
Are you trying to suggest that this article is saying that there's no media bias? Is that what they're trying to
Well, they're
say?
not
That it's all
exactly saying that, no. But what they're saying is that there may be a substantial role played by the bias that you bring to your perception of the media outlet.
fair enough. So the question is, first of all, I don't doubt that this is true. I'm sure that's the case. So the question is this prejudice that we bring in towards the news outlet justified? To me, this is the entire purpose of having a reputation, right? I mean, I may see a guy on the street and, or somebody may invite me to a barbecue with a bunch of friends because they're a fan. And if I find out that one of those fans is Jeffrey Dahmer, that's going to change my opinion about how enthusiastic I am to go out, to a barbecue with him and his friends. The reason that I would treat Charlie Manson or somebody else or Ted Bundy differently than I would treat the average person on the street is because they have already done enough harm to have a reputation that precedes them. And it is not biased to understand that if there is a repeated pattern of abuse of fairness, to put it in its mildest terms. If, in other words, look, I can boil all this down to one word, Scotty, and that's credibility. Newspapers and the press, before they became the audiovisual department of the Democratic Party exclusively, editors and publishers of newspapers used to understand that what they were selling was not news. People could hear things from anybody. What a newspaper used to be selling was credibility. In other words, yes, you've heard this, and this, but you hear it from us, and you can count on it being true because we have standards and multiple levels of fact checkers and all the rest of this nonsense that we now have in front of us. So if they're telling me that I'm biased and that I may think more skeptically about any given article when I find out it comes from the New York Times, I don't consider this bias. I consider this the fundamental form of intelligence. It is the ability to see a pattern and predict what's going to happen in the future based on that pattern. Very simple, really. And to the degree that the left is prejudiced against Fox, Fox obviously has its flaws and so on. But just to generalize, if you've got 9 media giants that are all liberal and one that is conservative. Let's just clarify that, let's just make it a cleaner line of distinction. You got 9 liberal outlets and you got 1 conservative outlet. What's going to happen if this bias does in fact exist? Well, the 9 liberal giants are going to cover some stories exhaustively, but more importantly than that, much more importantly than that, because that's the job of the press, is to cover stories. People say they're looking into Donald Trump. It's like, I agree, it's unfair. They should be looking into Donald Trump. That's their job. The problem is they're not looking into Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and all the rest. So you got 9 liberal media giants, let's say, and you've got Fox News. Fox News will report on things that are detriment to the liberal giants, and they won't report on it at all. And when they don't report on it, Scott, something interesting happens. When a news giant like the New York Times does not publish a story, then the public is led to assume, and not erroneously, that, well, since I didn't see it in the New York Times and I didn't see it on CNN, must be nothing to it. Must be another invention.
That's the paper of record, right? It's
right.
So if it's not in the public record, then it's not important.
It's the paper of record for the people who think they're fit to rule this country as the elites. I'll come back to that just very briefly in a minute. But so what happens? What is the actual practical outcome of this? Well, the practical outcome is you've got these 9 giants that are reporting on how evil Donald Trump is all the time. You've got one person that's pointing out, hey man, the economy is booming at 4%. The other 9 are not covering the story, which tells the people who listen to those 9 that it's not a story at all, and therefore Fox News is lying. And so what they do is they put, sometimes if you get like a foreign object under your skin, your body will form a cyst around it. It's like a protective layer of, fatty tissue and so on. And that's what they do. They put a cyst around Fox. And so now, if you have the scenario that I proposed, and I proposed it because it's the truth, then what you have is one outlet reporting stories that the other outlets are not covering for political reasons, and the people who listen to those other outlets are just going, Fox News. Oh, where'd you hear that? Fox News? Do you hear it on Fox News? Yeah, I heard it on Fox News. I heard it on Fox News because statistics show that Fox covers stories that the other places don't, and statistics also show that Fox is far less biased. In other words, they have more alternative viewpoints on air per hour than any of the other major networks.
Well, and I'm grateful to the New York Times for providing us with this discussion topic.
Yeah. Thank you very much. The New York Times is saying, New York Times claims that there is no left-wing bias against the New York Times, or on the part of the New York Times.
Well, and it's interesting because it says the data also suggests that those who approve of President Trump rate news articles with more bias than those who disapprove of President Trump. It's about 39 to 33 when it comes there. However, Trump supporters tend to be less biased than those identifying as, quote, very liberal.
Both of those statistics are in accordance with common sense and what is actually happening. If you say that that conservatives are more acutely aware of bias, it's because we're being outnumbered 9-1 like that. We see in front of our eyes daily the bias. We see it. We don't believe what these outlets say is true. Or let me rephrase that. We believe that what they're presenting as truth is extremely heavily edited, and parts of the story they don't like are uncovered. Other parts are emphasized, and so on. So they're telling a version of the truth that best suits their political interests. That's their business. They're privately owned companies. But the days of the American people simply saying, well, if Walter Cronkite said it's true, then it's got to be true. Those days are over, and thank God. It's not well known. I certainly was a surprise to me, but towards the end of his life, there's video. It's VHS video. I don't think anybody really wanted it shown. And Walter Cronkite, after he retired from CBS, was receiving an award from some organization that was in favor of one world government. And there's Walter Cronkite, America's most trusted man, speaking into the microphone at the end of his career, saying essentially that the United States of America should just be essentially like a zip code, a postal address on a one world governed planet, and that it was up to us to lead the way into a nationless future. Now, if that is my understanding after reading this, and I saw the video, there's no question he said it. It's not like a conspiracy theory he said this. It's on tape and you can find it. There he is saying it. There is Walter Cronkite saying, I think America should just be a post office address. I don't think there should be nations. If you're telling me that a man who almost went to work for that company at the beginning of his career and then simply comes and takes these accolades and makes a speech like that at the end of his career, if you're trying to tell me that the middle of the career, the part that we all know, isn't influenced by that, then you're out of your mind. And when Lyndon Johnson said, when he lost Walter Cronkite, he lost the war. He lost the Vietnam War, lost the American people. Cronkite had a special on Vietnam, and he basically said, I don't think we can win. And public opinion on the Vietnam War flipped by 30 points, something like that, in 3 days.
Okay, so you read a lot of news, Bill, because you have to prepare for what you do for a living here. As you sit down to read news, do you try to take off your bias glasses, or do you see it more as putting on a set of glasses that embodies your principles so that you're able to discern truth from fiction when you read the news?
What is the name of that movie? I hate it when I can't come up with this. I want to say it's called It Lives. There's a science fiction movie that looks like it should be terrible, but is absolutely awesome. And if I got the title wrong, my apologies. It just slipped my mind. But it stars well-known Academy Award nominated actor Rowdy Roddy Piper. and it's a terrific movie from which the immortal line comes. He comes into a bank with a shotgun, and he basically says, "I came here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum." And it's fabulous. But here's the premise of that movie. The Earth has been taken over by these kind of reptilian aliens, and they've brainwashed everybody. And so there's a pair of glasses that you can put on that filters out this mass hypnosis. So you'd look up on a billboard, you'd see a billboard for a woman washing her hands, and it's an advertisement for dishwashing liquid. And you put the glasses on, and all of a sudden that image disappears, and it's just black letters on white, and it says "obey." And everywhere you look, you're able to see all of these subliminal messages in black and white. Yes, I have a pair of glasses like that allow me to see through what I consider to be spin, because look, I'm a writer, I make arguments, I know how to make an argument, and I know when somebody's making an argument towards me. Now, that doesn't mean that what I'm seeing is not true, but it does mean that I have to consider the alternative. And you might be pleased to know, because Scott, I know you get a lot of heat for carrying the torch of actual, integrity. And a lot of people don't understand that when you ask questions like this, you are not asking questions like this because you're not a conservative. You're asking questions like the follow-up questions and so on because you want to hear the response defeated. You want to hear what people are going to say, what I say. You want to hear me defeat their response. So I do hear things that I want desperately to believe, and the more I want to believe them, the more likely they are to be not true. And those I look at very carefully. There have been a couple of occasions, not many, I take this very seriously, but a couple of occasions where I make an actual factual error. I make spelling errors and things like that all the time, but I make an actual, I'm simply wrong about something. I think the last time that happened was in 1963. Anyway,
I remember that.
Yeah, it was in all the papers. But when I do make a mistake, it bothers me more than anything else that I do. I take it very seriously. And here's the nice thing about being a conservative, Scott. I don't have to lie. I don't have to lie. I don't have to say one thing and do something else. I don't have to talk about how we should raise taxes and tell my accountant to get me the most tax breaks he can. I don't have to do that. I say one thing and I do the same thing. So I do look for things that look to be too good to be true. And if they are, then chances are they're too good to be true. But I've learned so much about journalism from you, who went to journalism school back when it meant something. And you are constantly taking the heat to ask the kind of challenging questions that are necessary. And the reason they're necessary, folks, is because if we can't defend these positions, then maybe they're not true. I'll just close by saying this, buddy. I started doing public speaking about 10 years ago. And I'd worked in the planetarium since I was 13 doing live star shows, so I was fairly comfortable talking with people. That wasn't the problem. I wasn't worried about talking in front of people. But for the first 4 or 5 years, I had this not unreasonable fear that somewhere out there I was going to run into the liberal gladiator. I was going to run into the liberal Achilles, and this guy would have so much information and be so well versed in defending the liberal argument that he would have me speechless, and I was terrified of looking bad for the team. Really was. I was really pretty worried about that. And then after 3 or 4 years, I didn't see this person arrive or any version of this person. And then I began to realize the reason I haven't run into the liberal intellectual Achilles is because he doesn't exist. And the reason he doesn't exist is because it's not possible for him to exist. When your entire philosophy is based on wishful thinking and how you would like things to be rather than how they are, you will never run into somebody who's going to beat you in an argument if you have facts at your disposal. And that is a comforting thought. I think that the clearest example of what the left does with newspaper bias can be explained this way. When I say they tell selective pieces of the truth, I think this is maybe the first analogy I ever came up with in my second or third essay at Eject. But very quickly, I was talking about Michael Moore, and I said, if you go down to Malibu and look down on the beach, you'll see that's just like most beaches. It's a white beach, a beautiful kind of, pinkish, sandy white beach. But I said, here's what Michael Moore does. Michael Moore looks down at this white beach. He walks down into the sand, and anybody who's ever held a handful of sand knows that while almost all of the grains are white or clear, there are a couple of little dark brown, almost black little specks in there. So Michael Moore sits there with a pair of tweezers, and he pulls out the black grains and puts them in a pail. And he does this for quite a long time. And when he's finished, Scott, he can hold up this pail and say, "Behold the black sands of Malibu." And on some level, he's telling the truth. Yes, it's true. The sand did come from Malibu. There's no question about it. But is that the color of Malibu Beach? It most certainly is not. And that's how they do it. They selectively pull individual facts, put them together in such a way, and then make a statement which you cannot contradict, because while the facts are actually true, the picture that they draw is antithetical to the real truth. And I don't mean the higher truth, or the metaphysical truth. I mean what actually exists. What color is the damn beach? And this is what they're masters of.
Well, Bill Whittle Now strives to be a show, perhaps the only show on the internet with 99% less straw men than any other commentary show. And so we do.
And the reason for that is because Mr. Scott Ott, for many, many years now, both at the previous residence and here, the reason that we don't have so many straw men is because people are constantly setting Scott on fire as he tries to basically show that these are not straw man arguments. So please keep that in mind. And for those of you who may have had a little bit of issues, with why is Scott always asking such challenging questions? He's asking these questions because he loves this country. He's the most committed conservative I know, and he wants to be able to defeat not just the argument, but the rebuttal to the argument.
Well, if you want to continue to live this straw-free existence with us, you can get notifications about these videos on YouTube by clicking that little Liberty Bell notification icon. You can also join us over at BillWhittle.com, which, by the way, in the coming days or weeks, you will see a brand new BillWhittle.com website there. It's served us well for these many years, but it's getting better all the time.
These many decades.
Our
website is now apparently trying to communicate with alien planets through radio telescopes. It's completely coming off the wheels. So we're doing a brand new site from the ground up. We should have it out shortly.
It'll be some sort of hovercraft after Bill gets done with it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Scott Ott for Bill Whittle Now. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making it possible.